There's a way that people walk into a room when they're excited to be together. It's a spark. They can't wait to jump in. And there's a way that people walk into a room that they're obligated to enter. It's a resignation, maybe some posturing. And people show up for conversation in a certain way when they're in a group of people they enjoy. They have this sense that they're leaning forward, that they're going to reach out or maybe throw their head back and laugh or tag in. And of course, there's a way that people present when they're waiting to activate their exit strategy. I've always been aware of the details of interaction, and in some ways, it's been my chief survival skill in the world. And so I suppose it makes sense that my professional life grew out of this exploration, from teaching English to running a nonprofit to overseeing leadership development. My husband and I even lived rent-free in an apartment complex for a couple of years in exchange for raising their lease retention rates through community building. Basically, through really great parties. When toxic culture crops up in these people-centric spheres of schools and churches, nonprofits, and neighborhoods, it can come as a surprise. But the motivation to fix it is generally present. In recent years, however, I have been directing my work towards an area that is sometimes known for its lack of humanity, the corporate workplace. I help managers, directors, and leaders transform broken workplace culture into highly engaged, positive relational environments. Now, you might be thinking, as I've heard multiple times from managers, that's nice, but I don't need people to be happy. I need them to do their jobs. But the way that people feel and participate in the workplace affects everything from creativity and innovation to productivity and revenue. Employees really show up differently when they feel valued and invited. They think creatively and point out problems and stay late to get it right. When every person in an organization is ready to roll up their sleeves, bring their full insight and intelligence, and work together towards the same goal, that is good news for any company. Unfortunately, this is not the standard corporate story. Every single day, Gallup runs a poll asking people to rate their level of engagement in work. And consistently, only 30 to 32% of people rate as engaged. Now, Gallup defines engaged employees as those who are involved in, enthusiastic, and committed to their work. Whereas disengaged employees, consistently around 70%, are doing the bare minimum to collect their paycheck. They're putting in the time, but they're not fully present. So take a look around you and imagine that the 10 people closest to you are a team that you lead. Of those 10 individuals, 3 of them are enthusiastic and committed. But the other 7 of them are punching the clock and waiting an excruciating 8 hours until they've earned the right to be somewhere else. But that is not the most terrifying part. The truly terrifying stat is this. According to that same poll, around 20% of people consistently rate as actively disengaged. These people are openly hostile or disruptive. They admit to behaviors that sabotage their company. So of those 7 disengaged individuals on your team, 2 of them are working against you, and you're paying them. In fact, Gallup found that these actively disengaged individuals cost companies in the US between $450 to $550 billion per year. That is a lot of lost revenue to chalk this up to a fluff problem. Gallup found that in a study of over 1 million American employed individuals, they found that the biggest reason by far that people leave a position voluntarily is a bad relationship with their boss. And Bridget Hyacinth says that a bad boss can take a good team and destroy it, causing the best employees to flee and the remainder to lose all motivation. So here's what I can tell you with 2 decades of culture creation under my belt, with absolute certainty. Leaders create culture. Sorry. Okay, are you wondering if your team is struggling with disengagement? Well, be on the lookout for disengaged phrasing. So members of your team might be saying things like, I'm just punching the clock, or what are you going to do, or that's above my pay grade. And of course, you can catch it in the management's conversation as well. They might be saying things like, if you want something done right, you've got to do it yourself. Or my personal favorite, I don't pay you to think. One leader told me it's like a grade school playground out there. There are no adults here. No one will just do their job. And it's easy to play the victim when your team doesn't really show up for work. It's very frustrating. And if someone's hiring a team dynamics consultant, then it's often so that you can come fix their broken team. But before you chalk this up to, man, it's hard to find good people these days, you should know that an employee's level of engagement is often related to their relationship with leadership. They were engaged when they got there. They just learned that their contribution was either unwelcome or unfruitful. Here's that quote from Bridget Hyacinth. So here's what I can tell you with absolute certainty. Leaders create culture. You can do it intentionally, or you can do it accidentally. But every single thing you do sets culture in motion. And if you throw your hands up and call it hopeless, well, that's creating culture too, right? You know that phrase, not my circus, not my monkeys? Well, bad news. This is your circus. You may have a problem employee from time to time, but if you have a problematic culture, it's time to take action. So begin by explaining and communicating well the kind of culture that you want. And as you do, keep in mind that people take in information in 3 primary ways. They may be auditory, learning from what they hear, or visual, through what they see, or kinesthetic, through what they experience in their body. These are your hands-on learners. So communicate the kind of culture you want in all 3 of those learning modalities, in writing, in conversation, and in practice. And as you do, be sure to address any toxic relational patterns that are playing out. True engagement requires a sense of safety around bringing concerns and insights to the table. So as a leader, it's your job to protect that space. Okay, now that you've set the tone, it's time to do the real work. Invite your team to bring their full insight and intelligence to the table. Include them in the thinking and decision-making conversations of your work. But before you do, keep this in mind. As your team dips their toes into the deeper waters of buy-in and commitment, it will be an experiment for them. If they say yes, if they invest fully, will they be glad they did? If you're asking for their opinion, make sure you mean it. This can be incredibly difficult for leaders because we've been taught that we need to be the most important and the most impressive, but this false need can cost us big time when it comes to engagement. It can feel really vulnerable to set down our own ideas long enough to truly listen to our team without agenda. But the alternative is to invite engagement and then immediately squash it. And then you run the risk of them never coming back fully. So it's like you're saying, please, tell me your ideas. Actually, I don't care about your ideas. I like my ideas. Don't you like my ideas? But I want to be the kind of boss that cares about yours, so I'm just playing that out for you here in this meeting. It is no fun to be asked your opinion about something that has already been decided. Am I right? So instead, don't pretend. Invite your team into real conversation with you and make it a practice to never, never, never answer first. you're the leader. As soon as you answer, alternative ideas become harder to share. Does someone have a question? Kick it out to the room. Learn the strengths of every person on your team so that you can invite their input in the places where it will play out best. As leaders, we spend so much of our energy focused on what we have to say and do that we drastically underestimate the extraordinary things that can happen when we strategically shut up and step aside. So, I want to share a strategy with you that you can implement right away in your team culture. It is very, very simple, also kind of revolutionary, and all you need is one whiteboard marker. This is an incredible tool if you want to model a culture of engagement in general and draw out some meaningful participation from a high-capacity team member. So imagine that you are leading a meeting and you are standing at a conference table at the front at the whiteboard. When you want that input from your team member, instead of just asking them across the table, actually invite them to the front of the room and hand them the marker. Literally hold it out until they walk up and take it. It's actually quite difficult to resist grabbing something that someone's holding out for you. It's a neat party trick. So when they do, you sit in their seat. And as they're leading this portion, resist every temptation to speak over them. Just sit back and watch as they grow in confidence that their ideas matter. Here's why this works. It uses all three of those learning modalities that we talked about. Every person in the room hears your invitation, watches you hold out the marker, and experiences your switch of placement. Really, the smaller the room, the better. The marker is a tangible signal that the person who's holding it has something to offer. And it reminds you in that same physical and sensory way that it is not your job to talk right now, but to develop the voice of your leader. It's a magic marker trick. But what if you aren't standing at a whiteboard? Well, consider your context. If you're a chef, it might be a spatula. If you're a construction foreman, maybe it's a clipboard. If you're a mom trying to help a second grader learn math, give the pencil back. But wherever you may find yourself, the act of handing something over and sitting down sends a strong signal that yours is not the only opinion that matters here. And that's the goal. So what kind of culture do you want to create this week? And are your actions in line with those values, or are you accidentally creating something that you don't want? Smart leaders work hard to create a culture of engagement. Because when you consistently and intentionally show up on behalf of your team, they'll show up for you. Thank you.